You're listening to Mondays Unfiltered, the podcast for anyone who's accepted that work is inevitably work. We're your hosts, Heather and Kristen. We break down burnout, baffling policies, and corporate chaos with dry humor and real solutions. Grab your coffee and whatever optimism survived the weekend, Mondays have begun. A little about us. Chris spent decades helping executives shape brands and craft messages that inspire, and I built systems that actually made those visions work behind the scenes and kept people from falling apart in the process. Thanks for joining us today. Good
Hey, Heather.
Monday.
I thought you were going to say good morning. I'm like, it's a little past morning by this point. It's been a long Monday, huh?
It has been a long Monday. I was at the doctor's this morning. I had a conference call in between. Then I had a physical therapy appointment. Then I met a client for lunch, and here I am. And I still have a
Wow.
meeting to follow this.
Oh my gosh, long day.
Long
Long day.
day.
Yeah, I had the office hours in my digital transformation class this morning. So, um, and I didn't feel so hot over the weekend. So
Oh,
I was still a little foggy this morning, and I'm like, it's kind of hard to absorb like data models when you're
mhm.
not 100%.
When
It's
you
hard
can't
for me to.
focus, no doubt.
So, speaking of data,
Ah, data.
guess what we're going to talk about today?
Is it data?
Well, you always do kind of start with data, right?
Yeah.
I have a couple of stats to talk about. Bear with me a second.
What's
We are
our
trying
full time?
something. So what we're going to talk about today is that 7 out of 10 adults reported they have to struggle to make ends meet. So
Oh,
7 out of 10 adults are working multiple jobs.
mm-hmm.
In my research for this, I also found some statistics from Statista. And if I can, I'll share it with us. And because this was even more stark. So bear with me a second.
7 out of 10 employees are working multiple jobs.
Yes.
Wow.
So if you can see this,
Yeah.
this is the Statista. 9.3 million Americans work multiple jobs to make ends meet. So in the Statista example, they said 7 out of 10, and it made it sound like everybody's working 2 jobs. But Statista broke it down into nearly 500,000 work 2 full-time jobs.
Whoa, two
And
full-time jobs?
2 full-time jobs, and we have a story about that to share in this segment a little bit. 5.2 million, and look where the dark blue is going. So that's
Yeah.
how the increase has been increasing. Um, 5.2 million are working 1 full-time and 1 part-time.
So that was as
Two,
of about 6 months ago.
yes. 2.5 million are working 2 part-time jobs. That's usually because they can't find a good enough full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And
Or
then
they have a challenge with like daycare or school time, and so to make that happen, they're picking up two part-time so they can accommodate kid needs.
could be. Hey, folks that are out there listening to us, and we're getting more.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to get really good interactions on our videos. So we're
Yeah,
hitting some
thanks for
nerves.
commenting, you guys. It's really encouraging.
Yeah, and we'll try to comment back to you. And 1.2 million, the hours vary on the first and second jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's really speaks to, the state of the economy. I
Yeah.
think you're right in a lot of cases. I'm going to stop sharing now. This will be referenced in the resources, everybody, if you want to see it. Um, so I think people are just trying to pony together jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And the example that I want to use, and it really came off, I think, a Facebook post or some social posts, is a woman in Florida, and it was reported in a Puerto Rican newspaper, but she was in Florida. I think
Mm-hmm.
she's Puerto Rican. I don't think it matters, neither here nor there,
Right.
that she's Puerto Rican. It was just the Puerto Rican newspaper that reported this. She was working 2 jobs, and 2 jobs very successfully.
Mm.
She'd been promoted 1 and had received excellent reviews on both of them.
Mhm.
And they did a return to work policy at her employers. And when she wrote in for the exception to both HRs, they must have been handled, both companies must have been handled by the outsourcing HR departments. You ever seen those?
Mhm.
You don't have big enough
Yeah.
staff to warrant keeping your own HR team, so
Right.
you outsource it. So I'm guessing, I don't know that to be the case, but they were two separate companies, and somehow the HRs converged, and they found that out, and she got fired from both jobs. So,
I don't, but I don't understand why, because she was
mhm,
successful in both jobs. So unless she signed a document saying she would not work another job, which occurred in one of my careers, where they said,
mhm,
you can't work somewhere else. And
mhm.
they actually had risk management teams that would research, because someone I worked with had not disclosed that they were working another job. And the risk management team reached out to them and said, we know that you have another career that you're working.
Another career or another job, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so it was like their own company on the side they were doing, but it was not permitted, which I don't get. If you're not interfering with the organization, who cares? And, the company might think they're paying you enough, but they're not the one paying your bills.
Well, I mean, who was I talking to recently? And kind of in line with this, um, it was a friend of mine, and they were saying, hey, when our parents were younger, when they bought a house, typically they were making about 3 times what the house cost.
Yeah.
And now it's the opposite.
Yeah. The house
Your
costs three
house
times as much.
is what you're making. And,
Yeah.
it often takes double incomes, right? There was another story I came across, and I can't remember if I kept track of it. I'll try to relook it and post it. But this was a couple in, I think, North Dakota, which is a beautiful place where
Hmm.
I just was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
They said between the two of them, they had 5 children and they were working 10 jobs. She had been a freelance writer, and that was
How's
her
that
main job.
even possible?
I I don't know, but their jobs, like, they live on a piece of property and they can raise cattle. So that
Okay.
was one of their sources of
Okay.
income. So the jobs weren't like, oh, I have to go to this job every day. They
Yeah.
were like gig jobs.
Yeah,
And
you'd have to do 2 jobs a day in order to work
yeah, no,
like
they're
in different
just,
places. That's like couldn't even keep track of it.
I think I would call it multiple streams of income, although
Yeah.
raising cattle is a job.
Yeah.
And so her husband was a preschool teacher, which provided the family benefits. She was making, I can't remember, a pretty consistent salary as a freelance writer.
Hmm.
And I think she had steady income from one source, and they cut back on that, which
Yeah.
isn't surprising given AI. They're going to cut writers. And
Yeah.
so they've pieced together 10 different sources of income, and they can't make it work.
And
I
wait,
can't
and
even
they still
imagine what
can't
a
make it
preschool
work?
teacher makes in North Dakota, like probably very little.
Yeah, I'm sure. But wait, the article that came from was, even though they were working 10 places, they still were having trouble meeting their bills.
Yeah,
Holy crap.
they're still having, well, they have 5 children,
Hmm.
and
I'm sure.
but
Well, you mentioned that they had a farm, so I'm sure there's a lot of money that goes into the farm. Like whether they own the property or they lease the property or they like that. I'm sure there's a lot of bills that go with running a farm.
I don't know. There are, I mean, when you raise, me having had horses, which they're basic money pits,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I would never have sold any of my horses for meat, but um, yeah, I mean, there's vet bills, there's
Yeah.
feed,
Well,
there's all
not,
kinds of
I
stuff.
mean, it's a story, it's on TV, but we just finished watching Yellowstone. And not to give it away, but towards the end, they talk about the cost of maintaining that, as the next generation, and if they're able to, or if it makes sense to sell it, just because it's so exorbitant in fees.
Yeah, it's that's a whole separate conversation. It
Mhm.
depends on how.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you have to have staff that you're paying,
Right.
anyways. So that was just one of the examples, and I'm sure there are plenty of examples out there. I was lucky. The only time that I was required that I needed to have a second job was when I had my first like professional job out of college or school. I had gone to postgraduate theater school in New York, but when I moved to DC with my parents, I had a job in a really small special events and PR company. And I was making, I think when I first told you about this, I thought I was making 500 a week. I wasn't. I was making $250 a week. And I don't know why I thought that was so great, but I had already been waiting tables before I got that job, and I have, you know, a communications background. To me, it was great to have this job. I had to drive into DC from Virginia. I just thought it was awesome. I was a coordinator or administrative coordinator, whatever it was, but you basically got worked to death.
Yeah,
And,
totally.
and so I waited tables and I kept waiting tables because I was trying to move out of my parents' house. And, but even back then, living in Virginia, it was expensive
Yeah.
to afford an apartment and insurance and your car and everything. And the other thing I was doing, I forgot I was doing this too, is I was working some special events, but that was only sporadically and getting paid for it. But Um, my boss found out that I was still waiting tables and he told me I needed to quit. And I said, well, if you need me to quit, he was
Mhm.
so afraid. And I was waiting in tables in a like a kind of an upscale family restaurant in Virginia. It wasn't even in DC. The high likelihood of his clients ever coming in was very low. And I was like, well, if you want me to quit, you're going to have to make up the money I'm
Why did he
making.
want you to quit? He just thought that he was paying you enough, or what?
No, he thought, well, I don't want my clients seeing you waiting tables.
Okay. Well, then make sure that you're covering my salary enough to cover all my bills then.
I
That's
told him
like telling
no.
you have to sell your house so that you're not spending as much money so that you can work for him in only one place. It's
And
like
live in a van.
it's like down by the river.
Well, you work in
Most
a
of most
restaurant, so you can eat there, but
I would say
yeah.
probably until I was in my early 30s. So a good 15 years of my career, I worked two jobs. Now, I love to shop. So I needed to make sure that I was paying off my bills because I was racking my bills up. But the sad part about working two jobs is that I often got a job at a place I enjoyed. And so I worked at Victoria's Secret. Well, most of my paycheck went back to Victoria's Secret. I worked at Sports Authority. Most of my paycheck went back to gym shoes. So even though I was working these extra hours to pay off bills, I was basically just writing my check back over to the organization that I worked for.
And they're smart about that too, because I've worked retail and stores that I liked, and yeah,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of discipline not
Yeah.
to
Well,
pay
and
money
so
there.
my most recent job, I was there for 10 years. I started at a decent salary, but I worked my way up to a great salary. And in that whole time that I worked there, I did not work a second job, which was awesome until the end when I started my own business. And they told me that I could not do that. And I was taken back because one of the things that they said was own your own career, but own your own career that we tell you you're allowed to do, which is
It's
not
just
okay.
it's just so two-sided, two-faced in a sense.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because the quote I found was not a movie quote, but it talks to your love of the retail that you worked in, but it's find a job you love doing and you will never have to work a day in your life. And it's by Mark Twain.
I love
Um,
that statement. My dad said
I
it to
love
me
that
my whole
statement
life
too.
growing up.
That's why we're doing what we're doing. I
Yeah,
love
I didn't
consulting. Like,
understand it until now.
yeah, I love what I'm doing now. It's just it's really rewarding to see other people's businesses grow and
Yeah.
develop,
Because I was like,
you
who
know, when
wants
you've
to
been helping
work?
them.
Why would being, doing work, why would that be fun? But what I'm doing is super fun.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And people are appreciative. Anyways, we're not here to talk about that. We're so love to
But
hear.
find
I'm
a
sure
job you
there's
love. And so utilize the skills that you have currently, which is what I talk to people about all the time. Identify the skills you have currently, identify something that you think you'll love or that you will fall in love in doing, and find a way to use those skills and transfer them into that new space.
yeah, figure out what your passion is because as Heather and I can attest to, your
It makes a
passion can
difference.
actually be your source of income.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of I'm into deprogramming. So that's part of what my program, when I work with clients, it's all about being able to reach into your um, intuition and what really lights you up. That's a
Yeah.
very simplistic way of talking about it.
Mhm.
And Heather and I met in a business coaching program that really literally helps refine
Right.
those things. But there are things that people do need, and um, it is becoming a gig economy. So I think it's out of necessity that people are
Mm.
getting multiple jobs. I just had somebody that I know close to me, another tech company, they're about to lay off. I can't say
Mhm.
which one. Um, but Oracle just laid off 30,000 people. And these employers are worrying about, well, people aren't committed. And this has been a trend for many, many years. And they're
Yeah.
like trying to lighten the load, so to speak, and we're going to use
Yeah.
AI.
I don't
But
believe that people are not committed. I think people are committed to the
well,
job
that's
that
what
they
I'm
do.
saying is
I
there's some
know.
they're complaining about
Right.
it.
Right.
But why
But
should people be committed if the employer's not committed to you?
right. Right. And that's like I feel like it's jaded on the part of the employer, in that the employee might not be getting properly recognized, might not be given opportunities that could help them engage differently. They might have, like, my sister in her role, she was transitioned into a role she did not interview for. She was told, this is now what you do. And she was like, I don't like doing this. So, yeah, you're not going to be engaged if you didn't interview for it and you got put into something, just because they told you you needed to. But the economy, like you were saying earlier about the cost of the housing being triple your salary, where before it was a third of your salary, and salary increases and inflation don't match in your increases. And so, of course, you're going to need to work a second job or you need to move. And so then you're looking for a different job. So it's not a winning situation.
Well, a lot of people, I think, are stuck right now too because they moved into different locations during COVID thinking
Yeah.
that they were going to be able to work remote. So we're not talking about that today. We probably could do a whole session on that one too. So what do companies do? You know? So I came up with, you don't want your staff to work multiple jobs, pay them a living wage and offer benefits.
Right.
And then I had a point, and I wonder what people think about this. I know that senior executives that I've worked with had board positions. And I know you're not supposed to take a board position that is in direct competition
All right.
with the company that you're working in. But why are senior executives allowed to take multiple board positions? Because in a sense, it's a job.
Well, and some of them get paid to do that stuff. So that's
That's what I'm talking about.
right. But like I had been voted into a position in my town as alderman, and it was a paid role. It paid a small wage, monthly, to attend the meetings and work within the community. And when I informed my company that I would be doing that, because it was considered employment. They told me I had to choose between one or the other because it was a government related role and they didn't want anybody in government, regardless of how big or small, and regardless of if it was voluntary or not. So even if I wasn't getting paid, I wasn't permitted to do it. And that was really disappointing because I wanted to be involved in my community, yet my employer told me I could not, that I had to pick between the two, which was really disheartening.
I mean, that is the most, I don't know what the attitude is. And I would have loved to sit down with that employer and say,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
knew that employer years ago that said, hey, you got to quit your restaurant job.
Yeah.
I know what his was. Like he just had an ego out the door. And I don't know
Right.
why he thought, like, I'm just a production
Like what
assistant. What
client would, who would recognize you, first of all? And what client would be like, I saw your assistant was waitressing. Like, come on.
Yeah, who cares? And I certainly didn't do it when if we had events and stuff, I did my arrangement. So I
Right.
refused. The other thing I've done too, even with my higher paying jobs, is on the side, I did real estate
Hmm.
and I got my license because I like to buy and sell houses. I'm lucky enough that I got in early. I can do that. And I'm like, to heck with it. Why am I paying a real estate agent? And I used to run the AOL real estate channel back in the day. So I got interested in it and I had some friends that were doing it. But
That's fun.
yeah, I did it and I had a really good partner in Virginia and I could buddy up with her and she only did real estate 100% of the time. So we worked out a really good system, you know, on sharing.
Hmm.
But I wasn't making, I did it because I had, people come to me. Um, I liked the extra checks every once in a while. It was a way for
I mean,
me to put extra money away.
yeah.
But, we can probably talk, have another session and just talk about doing gig things
Yeah.
because having multiple sources of income is really the way to do it and to make sure that um, I have friends that are worried about their job right now and they're really highly paid. And, I guess when you're raising a family, I know when you're raising a family and you're doing all the things and you're working a stressful job, it's almost virtually impossible. But I have one person I know, they're so frightened that there's going to be major layoffs. I don't think there's any worry about them being laid off because they're really well valued, but who knows? So
I can understand someone working a second job in the evenings or on the weekends to make ends meet. But also, like, it's unfortunate that it's even just to make ends meet, that it's not even to put extra money in savings or to build up your retirement
vacation,
or
right.
to, save for a vacation or to pay your kids' college. It's just to make ends meet. So
It's
paycheck to paycheck, that's horrible. I hate that feeling. I've done that before.
well, there's a lot to say about, the state of the economy and what we're in, and the fact that I forgot what it was. They said, I don't know the dates, but back in that late 70s or early 80s or whatever, there were like X amount of billionaires, and now there's like, 150 times more billionaires. So we're not here to really talk about that today. Maybe we
We're talking
will
about the
talk
people that
about
aren't
that.
billionaires, working multiple jobs for the billionaires.
Yeah. So what does that say? Who's hoarding wealth? And
Well, and one thing I said to one of the employers once, they had a lot of snacks and treats to engage people to stay in their desks and to work longer hours so that they didn't have to run out and get food. There was always stuff to eat. And the stuff that would come in when we would bring it in and it would be fresh and it was like appealing, and a lot of our staff was younger, they would grab quantities and like store them in their desk, or they would order two meals because the amount of money that they gave them to order a meal actually covered enough to buy two meals. And so the leadership was put off by that. At one point they said that it's not appropriate behavior, and and the comment, this is where it came in, the comment said, we pay them enough money that they should not act like this. And I said, well, I'm going to put a stipulation in there. You don't know what their home life is when they walk out this door. You don't know if they're, destitute. You don't know who else they're paying for in their home. You don't know who they're taking care of. You don't know how much debt they have. So your perception of what is enough may not be enough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would order 2 meals because usually I can make one meal last 2 or 3 meals. But anyways, we're in a transition. And years ago, it used to, there was a whole thing about engagement, employee engagement. I mean, was it a good place to work? What are the values? And, this just goes to show you, is this part of what the AI, trend is happening? And I was at a business conference last week, a whole day conference, and I was here in Colorado Springs, and the person who was the keynote speaker was talking. She said, and I believe this. I think I've talked about this before. I think there is going to be a backlash for AI. And we're already seeing it. Like, I'm seeing reports, like we've talked about this. Um, Google's quietly having to hire people back. Um, I've heard from Oracle employees that their customers are getting angry because they don't have enough people answering calls and dealing
Mhm.
with issues and questions. You cannot just have AI bots, helping people.
Right.
And it goes down to, in my mind, you're in business to provide some service or product to another human being. You've got to have a human being factor in there. And it's, to me, it's like sort of dystopian, this
Mhm.
rush to, oh, we're going to AI everything, get
Mhm.
rid of everybody. Um, cut their benefits, cut their um who's going to buy the products and services if you do that? Like, if you don't,
Mhm.
part of a good working economy is that everybody is gainfully employed to the manner that they want to be employed. They don't necessarily have to live in a mansion, but they
Right.
need to be able to buy their own goods and services and have that basic health care. So
Right.
we're getting really off topic, or
Mhm.
or this, but so
But I
what
don't
can
think we
people?
are because you're talking about why people are working multiple jobs. Just because the economy is in a position where it's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at jobs around here when I was first starting my company, just something to do. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense for me. And luckily, I put myself in a financial position for a little while that I didn't have to work. But I
Right.
was like, how can anybody make, because they say, oh, we can pay up to like $20. And no, 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 starting salary is $17 an hour. And it's like, I know how much houses cost around here. I know
Mhm.
how much rent costs. How are people supposed to? You can't, even $20 a month on a 40-hour work week. That's $800 before taxes.
Mhm.
That's not affording rent.
Well, even rent here for an apartment in my area for a single apartment is at least 12 to 1500 a month.
Oh, it's 2 grand here.
Yeah.
So it's,
And that's like
anyways.
on the affordable side.
Yeah.
Like, and that's not
Um,
affordable.
no. So what can employees do? Number one, if you're going to work 2 jobs, just know what your employer's policies are. If you want to
Yeah.
keep that job, keep it on the down low. And you might have some after this too, Heather. If you're going to work multiple jobs, and by the way, my next door neighbor, bless her heart, who's a divorced single mom, she, I don't know the details of the arrangements with her ex that she has, but I know she's not getting any support. But so she has to have 2 jobs, and she's
Mhm.
lucky enough that she has kind of an engineering or a tech job, so she can do 2 jobs. So if you're going to do work multiple jobs, make sure you show up for 100% of essential meetings and duties. That woman in the beginning of the session that I talked about, apparently she was showing up wherever she needed to show up, and she also perfected the use of multiple monitors. And so no one ever really knew
Yeah.
until she had applied for the exception to the work from home policy. Heather and I touched on this a little bit, but maybe start developing those gig roles. Um, where you start developing another source of income of something you absolutely love to do. And then you can build in your contractual terms. Hey, you want 100% of my time, this is how much it's going to cost. Otherwise, I take on multiple jobs. And it doesn't really matter as long as you're doing the job for them.
Right.
Um, so, and on the employer side, I firmly believe that the pendulum's going to swing back. And it was interesting. So, this person who was a keynote at the meeting I was at last week, she said she had heard Mark Cuban say something like he's investing in events, like live events, companies that do live events, because he felt with the over reliance on AI, trust is going to be a factor.
Hmm.
And that the only way to ensure trust is by showing up in person.
I love in-person events, and I
I do
planned
too.
them for many years. I think they're enjoyable, and if they're done well, um, not only are they a treat for the attendees, but you accomplish messaging and strategy from the position of the organization that's putting on the event. There's if you're talking to the right people about how to manage events and um, allowing people to use it as leverage for career development, it can be really powerful.
Oh, I agree. But I think it was interesting from the standpoint of, we've thread that whole AI conversation into several segments now that at least this is the way the keynote had said, is she said, that was a quote she heard him say is that, trust is eroding. And I think how you build trust is really through your people. And if a company, like a big tech company, is relying on AI to provide services and you're missing the mark, like we talked about the loops that you go into, the only way to really build trust is in person. So if you're getting rid of your good workers
Well,
who
and
have
a lot of
trust,
organizations eliminated annual meetings and eliminated, those employee outings or, uh, I don't know, retreats. A lot of that stuff got eliminated over the last 5 years. So it could be coming
yeah,
back.
yeah. So at any rate, love to hear from you all. We're starting to get some great comments, so we appreciate that. Well, our goal is to be able to use your comments in some way, shape, or form to craft the subject of another. And we seem to be hitting some nerves. So I know that a lot of people
Mhm.
are stressed and would love to hear also subject ideas.
Yeah, I
Um, I,
mean, to close up my thoughts on this is if you're working two jobs because you need to make ends meet and you're getting pushback from your employer, talk to them about what alternatives you could compromise on in order for you to be effective in your role and financially sound through their support. And alternatively, if the answer is no, then maybe it's time to find something else. And what you had touched on, Chris, was multiple streams of income. A couple of years I had learned about that with a new spin on it called portfolio career. And that's just
oh, I love that.
multiple streams of income, and it's a lot more positive than working multiple jobs, but it's what can you do to satisfy your income, your bills, making sure that you're making ends meet and that you're utilizing your skills in the best way possible and suiting the people around you.
Exactly. So until next time,
Stay
stay
unfiltered.
unfiltered. That's it for this episode of Mondays Unfiltered. If something today made you laugh, think, cringe, or finally question the workplace norms you've been conditioned to accept, good. That's where change begins. If you enjoyed the conversation, hit subscribe, share the episode with someone who deserves a better Monday, and help us push the movement towards healthier, more human workplaces. And we want to hear your stories. The surprises, the successes, the dysfunction, the burnout, the breakthroughs, just send them our way. Your experience might shape a future episode. And remember, we can do better, we can be better, and we don't have to tolerate BS just because it feels familiar. Until next week, stay curious, stay courageous, and stay unfiltered.